Welcome. Welcome. You are at the IDA seasonal chat. It's winter, as you can tell, from our backgrounds. We're glad you're here. I'm going to give some time before we introduce ourselves and get started, but we're glad you're here. And we were just while we were waiting for you guys to join us, we were trying to debate whose house we would rather be in. If we all have cozy, well, Danielle doesn't really have a fireplace. She's got the wood. We'll use the wood from Danielle's house, but she's got a lot of snow. We've all got some snow. My fireplace is enormous. Thank you very much. Clearly, Holly and I are not in Atlanta, even though we really are.
Atlanta's a little chilly right now, although it is warming up, but I think Danielle may have us beat when it comes to cold and snow.
I think it's been kind of a brutal winter for everybody, though, honestly, so
I mean,
far.
it's a balmy 15 degrees here in Connecticut. So.
Oh my goodness, that is very chilly.
It was probably a strategic error on my part, but I did wear my open-toed shoes today. Not in Connecticut.
Danielle, I'm curious to know how you all handle carpool up there because it's been so cold out at carpool this last week. I'm wondering how you handle it up there.
We just keep on keeping on. We make it happen. We're just used to the cold, honestly. So, yeah, not much has changed.
And you've got the equipment, right?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had the last storm. I think we got a little over a foot here. So that was a good amount, but our crews worked really hard. Everything was cleaned up, relatively quickly, and we got students back in.
Good. Well, I have 701. And I see we have several participants already on. I don't want to waste one more minute. I want to, first of all, welcome everybody. Greetings from IDA, Georgia. My name is Janet Street. I'm an Orton Gillingham Fellow, and I do teacher training with Smart Street Educational Consulting. But I'm also a member of the IDA Georgia Board, and I'm going to be your host tonight. And I'm so excited to bring you two unbelievably wonderful principals. One from Georgia, Dr. Holly Brookins. Am I saying that right? Brookins.
Brookins, everyone has a G, no G in it.
I know, sorry, Brookins.
That's
Um,
okay.
is an experience. You can probably saw it when you registered for this, but she has done so much in Georgia, which is fantastic. Right now, she is the principal of Burgess Peterson Academy, which is an Atlanta public school. But believe me, she's done a whole lot more than that at an elementary school. I also have Danielle Schoman, who is a very experienced educator, longtime advocate for students with dyslexia, just like Holly. She's also a principal at Flanders Elementary School in Lyme, Connecticut. So, what's really great and why we wanted to have both these amazing people here is that they have implemented structured literacy in their schools. And so, I think we all know that probably no change is easy. And that change has probably not been so simple. So I wanted to just start by having Holly and Danielle just kind of talk through, like if you met somebody on an elevator and they asked you, how did you get done what you got done? And why did you do it? And kind of what have you found? What would your elevator speech be to them? So I'm maybe starting with Holly.
So for me, gosh, probably 15 or 20 years ago, I had been a classroom teacher for many years at that point. I took I think structured literacy, science of reading was just starting to become something that you were hearing more about. And I was fortunate in that my principal at the time, it was in Atlanta Public Schools, had gotten right on board with it and provided training to us. And so I just remember that first week of training and learning more about structured literacy. I couldn't believe what I didn't know about teaching reading. And at that point, I had been teaching reading for many years. It really opened my eyes, and I just couldn't even believe what I did not know and the tools I didn't have in my toolbox. And from that point forward, it really became a mission and a passion for me to make sure that our teachers had what they needed in their toolbox to be able to teach kids to read, and that they had some of this great learning and understanding that I was starting to become more familiar with. So as I've moved throughout my career, teacher training has been a real passion for me, particularly in the area of literacy.
So that's been a big part of the success at your school.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I've been in several schools since then. I was an assistant principal. I moved into the role of assistant principal after doing that structured literacy training. And I was fortunate in that the school I was working in, also in Atlanta Public Schools, was already on board with structured literacy training. And so I really at that school helped to facilitate some partnerships. I looked for partnerships and ways that we could really open that training up to more people, more staff members, and do it at a reduced rate. That was really important because budgets are tight. They're always tight. And so looking for ways to be able to fund additional training for teachers was something that I did. So I reached out to a specialty school here in Atlanta that works with students with dyslexia, and they had a nonprofit arm, and they were looking to make an impact also for all kids, which I thought was so wonderful. And so we were able to partner, and they came in and did some training for us. And that's kind of how I have moved throughout my career, is looking for the partnerships, looking for the grants, looking for the scholarships, to try to defray some of the costs. I've been really fortunate in that our district leaders have also gotten on board with a lot of this work also. So it did make it a little bit easier for me. But yes, that is how I have moved throughout my career, because every kid deserves a chance to learn to read. That is critical. And that's really why we do this.
And every teacher needs something in that toolbox to help them.
Absolutely. Yes, we need for our teachers to have what they need to be able to teach our kids to read.
That's fantastic. Danielle, tell us about just jump in.
Yes, so a similar, story. So I've been in education 18 years, 10 years as a classroom teacher, and my experience was really a lot in upper elementary, so third and fourth grade. And I vividly remember an experience as a fourth grade teacher, and one of my kiddos was really struggling to read. And I remember feeling that sense of panic that I didn't necessarily have the capacity that I needed to be able to teach that child, the decoding skills that they needed. And that's really what started my journey. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to learn more because I need to be meeting the needs of all children. And just that mindset, I know we have interventions and I know we have special education, but the power of the core and being a really strong, instructional leader is so important to me. So that's when I started really, leaning into structured literacy and the science of reading. And when I took the role of principal in East Lyme, something that really drew me to the district was how far they were already in this work. COVID unfortunately disrupted, some of that,
Yeah.
forward progress. But I took the position right after COVID and was able to really just dive in and look at, literacy through a systems approach and looking at the systems and structures we have in place to support not only teacher training, but teacher professional learning, instructional moves in the classroom, lots of work around the research behind high impact teaching and what that looks and sounds like in the classroom. So that's really been a lot of my work here, just developing protocols and practices, developing leadership networks and teams within the district so that we have a clear vision as to what literacy should look like in our schools, and then like a practical application and action steps to make sure that vision actually happens and comes to reality for our students. So I would say that's really been my work, and we have a lot of great things happening in district with, as I said, embedded professional learning, our MTSS structure. We've revamped and revitalized analyze to make sure that we're not missing students. A lot of work with our ML profiles and how we're supporting students in the classroom, and a heavy emphasis on student-centered coaching. So we definitely try to get staff, trained and certified in OG and Wilson, but sometimes time and resources can be challenging. So we've really looked at an in-house structure that we can also facilitate to meet the needs of our learners.
I'm going to pick up on what you said there about coaching. So maybe both of you like talk to us about, because I know that can be tricky. A lot of teachers get funny about, having a coach come in, and they might feel like I know you don't set it up to be punitive, but they always feel judged, and like, how do you get past those challenges? Because I think
Mhm.
that coaching is critical, right? Wouldn't you say it's critical?
Yes, it's definitely critical. And, we really talk among staff about, the most famous basketball players have coaches, and that's how they elevate and get to the next level. And that's what coaching is, right? It's someone that has an expertise in literacy and foundational skills and comprehension, all of those things. So they are really just helping to enhance the skill sets that we have and maybe see areas that, we could focus on, intentional things that we can do to increase, the efficiency of our teaching. So we, in the student-centered coaching model, there's, a visual, a ring, and it can take time to get from the outside of the ring to the inside. And that's really about building trust and relationships. And I've talked with my coaches a lot, and they might have to stay in that outside ring building relationships for longer than maybe they would like to. But once you have that relational trust, that's when magic can happen, right? So then the coach can go in and there can be co-teaching, there can be modeling of lessons, and it's not from a punitive approach. It's a let's do this together and let's, really celebrate what's going well and what we can improve on. So we've been doing the student-centered coaching model for years now, ever since I've been here. So 6 years. And we've really seen over time the strength that it has. And then going back to, just scheduling, we meet as grade level teams biweekly with our coaches. And we talk about student data and groupings for, small group instruction and really instructional moves that we want to see happening in the classroom, progress monitoring how that's working, and then readjusting. So it's a really fluid process, and it's taken a while to get there, but the impact has been great.
Tell more about that, Holly. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I have my own middle school kids and my cat and my dogs all here tonight also. So just trying to cut back on any noise you may hear. We have a similar model in that we do have a literacy coach. And I think, as Danielle said, part of or a real key for effective coaching is making sure that there's trust there and that the teachers trust the coach, that the coach has the knowledge, not just around literacy, for example, but also around how to coach, because it's a true art. So making sure all of those things are in place. The other thing that we have done is we're partnering with a nonprofit organization around structured literacy, and they've just been fantastic. This has been an ongoing partnership since well before I came to my current school. This is my first year at my current school, but this work has been going on since well before me. And they also do coaching in that they go into the classrooms, they will teach lessons, they provide feedback to the teachers when the teachers are teaching lessons. So having a setup in that way is also really helpful when it comes to coaching.
Do you think it's helpful to have an outside coach versus an inside coach?
I think I think it is great if you can have that outside coach, but again,
Hmm.
that requires the funds, the
Hmm.
partnerships, all of the things, right?
Right.
So I think it's also critical that you have an inside coach who has that relationship with the teachers and
Definitely.
who has the knowledge and has had the training to be able to then provide it to the teachers. So I don't think outside training or coaching is necessary in that way. It's
Hmm.
great that we have had that partnership going on for so long, but really your inside coach is the critical component.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just interrupt us for 1 second because we did get a really good question that came in that I think it's probably worth us addressing. I'm gonna read it to you. Um, this is from a person in Georgia, and this is their wonder. If we know that teachers need to know to improve literacy, why does the training being received look so different across the state? That's a really interesting question because it really shouldn't look so different, right? I mean, uh, uh, if the training programs that I know of that are focused on structured literacy, and I mean, I'm talking everything from Orton Gillingham to Wilson to, MC and letters, all of those trainings are based on the same principles. So I don't think the training should look different. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree. I would think, though, that that is not just a Georgia thing. I think that is something that is happening across our country. And it would be great if, in a perfect world, we could all get on the same page with what it should look like for our teachers and how we're implementing that in the classrooms.
So are we kind of admitting that the reading wars on some level are still raging on? I mean, is that fair?
I think we're coming to a better place and a better
It
understanding
does
for
seem that way.
sure. And there has to be some autonomy in some areas. However, it should all be based on the science of reading.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I would agree with that. And although it's not, it's strictly for the science of reading, in Connecticut, they just passed legislation, the Right to Read Act, and all school districts in Connecticut were required to adopt a literacy curriculum that, aligned with certain components. The state gave us options to choose from, and districts could, you know, I guess go forward with one that they have already, but it had to be approved by the state. And
Yeah.
that I think has been a step in the right direction for an assured experience across Connecticut schools.
Right.
That we're hitting on components that are essential for reading.
Gotcha. Okay. I am going to keep going. Talk about when trainers come to the class to model lessons and give feedback. I mean, you keep saying the term instructional moves. Danielle, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so as part of our student-centered coaching model, we have all teachers engage in at least two cycles with our coaches over the course of the year. So we'll have an initial meeting with teams or individuals based on what the need is, and what the data, really shows us. And we develop goals that we'll work on over the course of the cycle. So typically cycles are, 6 weeks. So based on the student data, then we determine what groupings would look like and what strategies the students in the classroom, require. And as I said, it's really fluid. So you might have, a group of students that, based on their data, they're fluent readers, but their nonsense word fluency is really low. And what that tells us is, wow, they're probably using lots of context clues to get by, but the wheels are probably going to fall off soon. So we have conversations about the data in that sense. And we use Dibbles as one of our, benchmark assessments. And then, form groupings. And then, we have a structured literacy lesson plan that our teachers use as part of that small group instruction. So it's a pretty tight process in that sense. And then we're coming together biweekly to discuss, where students are and then what we need to do instructional wise to change to meet the needs. So I know that's a bigger overview, but through that coaching cycle, we're constantly just talking about, what instruction should look like and how students are responding and then adjusting and modifying as necessary.
Yeah, it's one
Same.
thing to learn a little bit about the spelling rules and the all of the things you need to know, but then how to implement it.
Hmm.
That's a lot also.
Yeah.
And it's so nice when everybody in the building is singing the same, from the same
Hmm.
hymnal, so to speak.
Yeah,
When
that
we
common
all
language is essential. And,
Yeah.
I think too, that's where that trust comes in with coaching because I feel like our teachers, they really do talk to the coach and say, you know what, I'm not really feeling comfortable with this. Like, would you mind modeling what this might look and sound like in class?
Mhm.
And, or we'll say, there's, a teacher that does this really well, and we'll get coverage so that teachers can go and observe other classrooms to, see those instructional moves. So,
Yeah.
building wise, it's really a culture of continuous
Yeah.
learning when it comes to that, but it takes time and trust and learning from another and being able to be vulnerable if you don't know something so that you can, learn and move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that our teachers are learning from one another. When you have that shared understanding, that common language, that shared training that is happening and has been happening, it allows the teachers to also be able to learn from each other. And I think that is a really nice piece of it as well.
Yes. It's important that we all, I don't care how much you know about structured literacy, you're still able to learn more because it's dense. There is a lot to know. So, I love everybody adopting that vulnerability and that sort of mindset, that growth mindset, right?
Mhm.
And that shared
Um,
belief across the school, in terms of why we're doing this and why it is so important that we are using these research-based practices in our
right,
classrooms.
right. What about co-planning and co-teaching? I think you guys have done some of that. Do you want to touch on that?
Do you want to speak to that a little bit, Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, in the co-planning and co-teaching, that's part of our, student-centered coaching model. So the coaches will meet. I'm often part of those meetings, and we will just discuss the upcoming lesson. They will, it depends on, like I said, the level of comfortability with the teacher. Sometimes it is a true co-teaching model, where other times it's more observation and then reflection after about what happened. But we've really let the teachers take the lead on that, on their comfortability as, we're moving forward in this. So some teachers will, take the lead, and others will, prefer to observe and take notes and then, turnkey what they've learned to the next lesson. So, again, that's a constant process of dialogue and conversation between, the teachers and the coach.
Yeah, our teachers meet regularly with the coaches, including co-teachers as well, and they're looking at data, they're planning, they're determining what comes next for the child. And so we have a regular schedule for planning PLCs that include the coaches and any teacher who's working with the child.
So for you guys as leaders to jump into this, you had to go through your own training and you really have to be on board before this change is going to happen. And that's true in any school, right? And I believe the training that you took was based in structured literacy, right? Um, both of you, right? So, I'm just addressing that because we keep getting questions about that. And I will say this too. It seems that especially as states adopt legislation requiring structured literacy like Georgia has, it takes time. It still takes time for that to sweep across the state to every school. I think we're sort of in flux right now. Is that fair, Holly? That some schools
Mhm.
are really on it more than others?
Absolutely. Yes, I do agree. And I think it's really important that as a school leader, that I have had a lot of that background training also,
Mhm.
because then I'm able to speak to it, understand it. So that has was really important for me. I've done so much training over the years. My former district brought letters for administrators on board for us, and that was really helpful. I've done some OG, all kinds of structured literacy training. And so that really allowed me to share my passion with the teachers also and get the buy-in because I was doing the trainings also.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I would
Go
say,
ahead.
yeah, participating in training definitely important. In our district, I'm part of our literacy leadership team. So we worked over the course of the year with the Hill for Literacy and engaged in, continuous training. We mapped out a district literacy leadership plan. I actually have another literacy leadership meeting on Friday where we'll be updating, where, we establish short-term, like middle and long-term goals for the district in regards to literacy. And that's how our team. We went to the IDA training, in Atlanta. So it's really this, I saw a comment come up, but this culture of continuous learning. And,
Yes.
when we know more, we can do more and we can do better. So I think that is really important from a district level as well. I can do a lot within my building, but it's important to have those networks from the central office, position too, and that stance that, we need to ensure that all children have access to appropriate reading programs and to learn to read. Like that's a human right. So very important.
Well, and I love that you said continual learning because in my experience, and it sounds like for you guys too, you don't just learn this once and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. I mean, you learn it and then you start to implement it and then you realize how much you don't know and you learn more.
Mhm.
And then you go, you kind of start at this phonics level, right? And then you can do refresher courses at that level, but then you get more into morphology and syntax and writing, which is all
Mhm.
important parts of literacy. So just because you've done the initial training, am I right? Can you
Yes.
talk about that?
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to talk to that a little bit. So, that you're exactly right. When I first became principal at this school where I am this year, this is my first year there. I was the principal in another district for 5 years, but my first year here, I really wanted to get to know the teachers and, of course, the school and what the needs were. And so one of the things I kept hearing from them was, "We have done so much with phonics. We want to take it to the next level." So what we are working on this year is syntax, morphology, and really diving into writing. So the teachers feel like they've got a really good foundation and now they want more. And so we're doing those more advanced skills. That's where we are. I was wondering if I could also, I saw Mary's question asking about her last question, where talking about the culture of continuous learning. And she said she hears often from schools that literacy is an ELA thing, and how do you get the other teachers on board?
Mm,
And I think that's a great question because I think, of course, literacy, is embedded across everything we do with our students. And one of the things that I did was we opened up the Orton Gillingham training to all of our teachers, including our specials teachers. Our and some staff, our kindergarten paraprofessionals. And so that was really helpful to have everyone across the school speaking the same language and having the same shared understanding. So I appreciate Mary asking that question.
well, especially when you have a parapro in the room who can take that struggling reader or two or three and pull them aside and really work with them, but they can't do that if they haven't been trained and they don't know what they're doing. So
Yes.
that's a brilliant idea for making more individualized instruction.
Yeah, and it was even helpful for, I think, our specials teachers because then they were able to also embed some of that in what they were teaching. So, our music teacher, our PE teacher, art, there were opportunities for them. And I know that is a heavy lift budget wise, but I do want
Mhm.
to take this opportunity to say that is where we really looked for the scholarships, the grants, all of those things to help with that. And, you know, I know that IDA Georgia has done a lot in terms of grants and scholarships, and they are offering scholarships to teachers now for structured literacy training.
Yes,
So I want to encourage anyone who is listening to spread that word and share that news because that is such an awesome resource for us.
it is. I'm really glad you mentioned that. Um, you can go on the IDA Georgia website and look under scholarships, by the way. It's available to Georgia teachers, so definitely make use of that. We have another question that came up, and I'm really glad that this one came up. because I'm going to read it along the same line, how to get middle schools on board. It seems that once a child reaches middle school, there's a belief that if they haven't learned by now, it's too late. Virginia, I totally agree with you. It is not too late. It's very important. Now, we have two elementary school principals here, but it's still a fantastic question. Do you guys want to talk about that at all about how can we get middle schools on board?
Well,
I
I'm a
mean,
middle school mom. I've got two of my own middle schoolers. But I think hooking the teachers with understanding how they can start to implement some of this and why this training would be helpful for them in the classroom when we think about vocabulary, morphology, writing across all different content areas, not just an ELA thing, but it's useful and critical in all different content areas.
Mhm.
yeah, I was just talking about that today with one of my literacy interventionists, like science, for example, how that can, truly lend itself to morphology and math, and just how, we really need to see the interconnectedness of all of the content areas so that we're more efficient and not to view things in silos. We crosswalked our special areas with our literacy, curriculum and components, and we're like, okay, where can we build these things in so students are also hearing it in multiple environments and they're not thinking, oh, this is only applicable when I am in, class reading, or this is only applicable when I'm doing my foundations, work. So
Right.
seeing that it truly transverses all content areas, and that it's, an important skill to be successful in all areas.
Yeah, I love that. I here's another great question from Mary, who's on listening. What do you say to teachers who say, and this comes up a lot, who say, yeah, training, professional development, it's not really required, and I don't really want any more training, and and I'm not getting paid for it, so like, I'm done. And I've been at this for years. I know what I'm doing, et cetera. That kind of attitude. How do you combat that? Because that's a real thing.
Yeah, I think we really focus on the why. A lot of times we lead with the what or the how, but when you get down to the why, we need to do this to ensure that all students learn how to read to be successful. I mean, how can you argue with that?
Yeah.
And then I think it's really important that, change is hard and resistance is inevitable, but you find your people that are, your go-getters and your, yes, I want to do this. This sounds great. And it really starts to, build momentum because then,
Yeah.
you see the scores and those classes are going up and those kids are confident and successful and coming to school more and happier. And it really
Um,
just, it starts to spread. And there's there's a book, The Energy Bus, and it's like, get
Uh-huh.
on the bus or get off, So you start to gain momentum and it starts to shift the culture of the school. And I feel like those people that don't want to change eventually, it gets to a point where they're few and far between, and then they have to make a decision if the district is a good place for them because we are here, for our students. So I think it takes time and, but the why really needs to be your like North Star, like keep that
yeah.
strong.
I
And I
find that
also,
go
oh,
ahead, Holly.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I think for me as a principal, it's thinking about what can I take off my teacher's plate so that they have the bandwidth to be able to do something else because our teachers are working so hard every day. They have good intentions. They want to do what's right for kids. But oftentimes they're tired.
Yeah.
Teaching is a hard job. And
Yes.
so, how can I, as the principal, take things off their plate, give them back some planning time? What can I do so that they are feeling that energy to be on the energy
Yeah.
bus and keep it going?
Yeah. I find that when I do teacher trainings, I say to the teachers, you're gonna probably be angry at some point in this class because you're gonna say, why wasn't I taught this in my undergraduate program?
Yes.
Or I even have a master's in,
Yeah.
reading, and I was never taught any of this.
Yeah.
And sure enough, by about day two, they're angry. And
Yeah.
they should be, and the good news is that's starting to change. I'm going to be positive here. That's starting to change. Universities are starting to teach more of this, thank goodness. But it's really been, I think, more of a grassroots, parents across the nation saying, this is not good enough, you know.
Yeah.
And along those lines, Sherry, who's listening, has brought up a great question that I do think we need to nip in the bud. She says, I'm still hearing teachers blame families for children not being literate. Is there a way to combat that thinking? In other words, there used to be this thing where you'd say, well, I mean, are you reading to the child at home? And,
Yeah.
kind of throwing it back on the families. Tell us do you still run into that and how do you combat it?
I think it's a team effort, right? And so I think our kids come to us in all different ways and from all different walks of life. And I think it's really important for us as the school and the teachers to meet the child and the family where they are.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say the same, just partnership in the work, I think being really transparent about our processes and that, we're learning too. And as we learn more, sharing communications with families, like we've offered, parent nights before, like literacy nights, just to, enjoy and celebrate reading and make sure that, we provide information, like I said, about the science of reading and structured literacy. Sometimes it's just, you know, a lack of understanding or knowledge because, they just may not know. So we really try to partner with our families. We also offer like parent universities. So I think that's one component, but really just, yeah, partners in the work.
Well, and that brings up another question that Sherry had, which is that, IDA does have videos that support structured literacy, that kind of explain structured
Mhm.
literacy. And we all need to be remembering to make that connection, and have teachers as well as families understanding that there really is a science to teaching reading. So, and using those videos.
Yeah,
And it's not just IDA's videos too. I know, Holly, you were talking about Made by Dyslexia has great
yeah,
videos.
they do. And in fact, in uh, 2 schools ago, Made by Dyslexia came to our school with some friends from the Skank School and filmed our teachers using structured literacy principles in the classroom. And they have those videos on their website. And right now, we're partnering with Reading Universe, who is coming in and they're filming our teachers. And so parents or teachers can go right on their website if they want to learn more about a particular rule. Maybe it's coming home for homework and the parent's not sure what it is. They can look it up right there and see a video or see it happening. And teachers can also see some of that as well. Of course, nothing replaces training, but
Right.
that's a really great way to be able to see some of this work in action.
I'm really glad you mentioned that resource, Reading Universe, which is a website that you can go on, readinguniverse.org. And it's real easy to bring up videos of all kinds of topics. So
Yeah,
that's a great resource that I came across recently. I'm glad you brought that up. Um, okay, I'm seeing some different kinds of questions. And some questions were submitted when people registered. So I want to talk about one of those, if that's okay. Here's one about alignment, which I think is a really interesting one. Can appropriate instruction in structured literacy be effective if all teachers are not trained? I'm seeing approaches in the classroom that don't align either vertically from like first grade to second grade to third grade, or horizontally from different classrooms within a grade. So how do you First of all, that's a great question. Can it be effective if not everybody's aligned? What do you guys think about that?
well, it's interesting that vertical alignment question came up because I was just meeting with my coaches today and we were thinking about a professional learning day that is upcoming. And that's one of the things that we want to do is bring teams together to do some of that vertical alignment because we see a need for that. So I think that's a really important piece. Um, of the puzzle is making sure that that alignment is there. What
Hmm.
are your thoughts, Danielle?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think alignment and training are different. So you can all have training, but that doesn't always necessarily mean you'll be aligned either. We've done similar things that Holly talked about. So we have had grade levels meet, with the grade before and the grade after to have those conversations about what's being taught and what's coming next. So I think it goes back to also, as we discussed, having that common language, making sure that everyone is on the same page. And also having a really clear vision. And I'm going back to like the district level of what literacy looks like. And like I said, we've done a lot of that through our literacy leadership team. So we have, a framework and, what each grade level, components will look like. And the coaches are, part of that work, the building administration part of that work. But making sure that that vision is clear so that people, know what needs to be executed in the classroom so that everyone's working towards, the same direction.
Okay, awesome. I just seeing a comment that that another great resource in addition to Reading Universe is Planet Word for videos, which I believe isn't that an actual museum in Washington, if I'm right about that? Because I remember telling my daughter I have to go there.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is. It's a museum. I mean, it's in Washington. Anyway, thank you for submitting that. Okay. We talked about coaching. That was one of the questions that came in. And obviously coaching is so important. And modeling, having somebody to go in and model is really, really helpful. Um, what instructional leadership moves help teachers dig into newly implemented structured literacy curriculum and use it with integrity? And I guess along with that, using it with integrity, but also understanding how to use the data. I find a lot of times that there's all this data available to teachers and they don't really know how to translate that into the next step of instruction. Can you guys talk about that?
Yeah, I can start if you want. So I know that's a couple bullet bullets in the question. So first, we have an MTSS, process and protocol that we follow. So we have team leaders, and I really lean heavily on the team leaders when it comes to, data analysis protocols. So, for example, we just did our benchmark assessments, and I'll be meeting with my leadership team on Monday. So one piece of that is time to be able to dig in and, look at the data. So we provide sub coverage, we get our leadership team, and then we analyze the data. We really look for bright spots. So where are we really excelling and how do we replicate that? So that will be like the next step when we go to teaching and learning, having conversations about what's happening in that classroom. What is that teacher doing to get these, kind of results? And then we also focus on those areas of improvement and then action steps to then, implement in the classroom. So I think our MTSS, tightening that up. So making sure that you have a strong instructional core. So we utilize, foundations and Heggerty for, phonemic awareness and phonics. And then we also have Wit and Wisdom as our knowledge building curriculum. So that's where we're working on, our comprehension. So making sure that you have a robust, literacy program as a whole is important. And then kind of monitoring, over the course of the year, how that's going. And I know that goes back to structure. So we have opportunities throughout the school year for teams to get together to calibrate. So we'll look at end of, module assessments or how students are performing, let's say, after a foundations unit, and we will give time to talk as grade levels. We also provide time cross district grade levels so that we can look at trends, from multiple schools. And I think that is so important to have the time to talk, reflect, and then plan. Because as we
Yeah.
talked about before, there's never enough time, right? And
Mhm.
often we, we'll get data, we'll look at it, and then we're on to the next thing. But engaging in that continuous feedback loop and data analysis and creating action plans is really critical to moving that needle. So moving from just discussion to actual, action is important, and that takes time. So I would say giving that is a really important component.
Yeah, I would agree that that time piece, again, there's never enough time in the schools. That's always the challenge, and always something that teachers are craving more of is time for planning, particularly. So we do have several structured planning times throughout the week. And then teachers have, of course, time on their own to plan as well. Our coaches lead some of the planning. Our MTSS team, our intervention team, they're all involved in that. We recently had a really great structured literacy training. And we built in time at the end for the teachers to then take what they had learned and plan with their teams. And I think, again, that time for planning is really critical when it comes to really being able to implement and integrate what you're learning.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
and
and we're
it's
working. Oh, I was
yeah.
just gonna say we're working on one thing in particular. So at the end, of a session, sometimes it can be overwhelming. There's so many different things you can work on. But when we leave the meeting, what is the one thing that you are going to do over the
Yeah.
next, let's say, 3 weeks? And then we come back. How did that thing go? And what are we doing next? So really like laser focus so that we're moving the needle. Because it can be overwhelming with all the different, ways that you can go.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. Um, okay, I have another question that came in upon registration, and I think it's kind of an interesting one. It's kind of specific. It's about kindergarten comprehension. So I'll just read it to you. What are some suggested comprehension strategies for kindergarten students post-COVID? We are seeing that kindergarten students retaining more comprehension skills after viewing a book video versus listening to a story read by their teacher, which I think is very interesting because I thought that the research showed the opposite effect, that you get better comprehension from an actual live person reading it to you. So I'm just curious. I mean, that's a very specific question, but are you seeing that? Are you seeing changes in how these youngest kids after COVID are kind of comprehending or at
What are
all?
your thoughts around that, Danielle?
I mean, I would say just from a screen perspective, I think sometimes, the screens grab students' attention, but I really feel like our kindergarten friends are really engaged, during read aloud times and are able to engage in conversation. I think, it has a lot to do with the questions that are being asked and, the think alouds and the models. And so I would say we really haven't, struggled with that. That much, but I'm sure that that
Right.
is something that, could be a challenge because we do see, lots of screen time and sometimes it taking a little bit more to get students engaged, when it's not a screen. But
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think, like you said, keeping kids engaged by lifting student voice and allowing the kids to have opportunities for that academic discourse around what they just heard, and ensuring that there are a lot of techniques being used so that kids have opportunity to turn and talk to one another, to make sure that their voices are being heard to keep them engaged. Because oftentimes, like you said, Danielle, our kids are so often at home, as I'm a parent, and that screen time battle is constant. So, sometimes how are we making sure that our kids are not so engaged in the screens that they're having a hard time focusing when it comes to engaging with their teacher and peers? That's a
Well,
battle for me.
it's interesting because it looks like Mary has posted something that I was just about to say, which is, if somebody on a screen, like I know they have these celebrities get on and read a book to the kids,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. Well, they're just reading the book. But
Yeah.
and you know what, to be honest with you, as a new teacher, I remember that's what I did. I read the book. And as an experienced teacher, I began to realize that I needed to ask very specific questions to see, for instance, did the student get the inference that the author just made? Because they don't, right? And so
Yeah.
I think when you have a live read aloud, especially with an experienced, talented teacher, that person is stopping and saying, "Hey, why did the character just do that? What just happened?" what do you think's going to happen next? Doing those touch points to check, are you comprehending this? Do you know what's going on? Do you know why? What are you expecting to come next, et cetera, et cetera. That's critical, I think. And it also teaches kids, oh, this is kind of what I'm supposed to be doing as I'm reading. It's not just about decoding the words. It's about
Right.
thinking about what I'm reading, right? Uh,
Hmm.
Also, I think you have that's a great opportunity for syntax where you're putting in those pauses and that all that prosody that that the teacher's bringing expression. You were going to say something, Holly. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and questions that are not just surface level, right?
Right.
Questions
Right.
that dig a little deeper.
Hmm.
Right.
And utilizing routines in the sense, so you might have a hand raised, but also you might have a turn and talk. You might have so and so said this. What do you think about that? And the adding on. And so I think having variety also increases engagement rather than just to sit and listen.
I
Right.
came from
Because
my former school was an EL school, and their motto is leaders of their own learning. And I just love that. And I think that's so important that we're allowing kids to have voice and to be leaders of their own learning. I think that is just really brilliant.
I used to say, are you on the bus or are you driving the bus
Mhm.
of your learning? Who's
That's
in
right.
charge? You need to be driving that bus, right? Okay, I have 750. So gosh, this has been so rich. We've had really great participation from the audience asking great questions, and thank you. So thank you everybody for doing that. And it's a great dialogue. Obviously, they're very interested in what you guys have to say. So hugely appreciative. I wish every student in the whole wide world could be in your schools because it just sounds like you guys are doing it right. So thank you so much for everything you've been doing.
Thank you. And please, if anyone has further questions or wants to chat, feel free to reach out to me.
Yep, and same. Thank you all so much for attending. This has been a really great opportunity to have some dialogue.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.